burger or biryani, order it on ONDC and see it gives you a better deal than Zomato and Swiggy, quote unquote. Excited consumers and their social media chatter have finally given the Open Network for Digital Commerce its aha moment. A year after the government launched it, with the mission of democratizing and increasing e-commerce penetration in the country. Now, the price differential was a result of deep discounts which were employed after sales failed to take off, despite aggressively scaling the network for a year. Once consumers found out, in about 2 weeks' time, orders soared from a few hundred, hitting 25,000 daily orders in early May. Now, that's not a bad way to celebrate the first anniversary. While many assertions have been made, e-commerce the way it is will become irrelevant, Zomato and Swiggy's duopoly will be broken, digital feudalism and their digital landlords will be unseated, so on and so forth. However, analysts are cautious. They do concur that ONDC has a long way to go before it can break through the so-called walled gardens of Amazon, Flipkart, Zomato and Swiggy. More importantly, ONDC has some explaining to do, especially about what it is and what it seeks to become. What we understand today is what it is not. We know it's not an e-commerce app, it's not a marketplace, and it's not a platform. ONDC is a protocol, an enabler, a facilitator. It is what is arguably being called India's next UPI. What UPI did for payments in India, ONDC could do for e-commerce is the assertion. But despite these assertions, none of the e-commerce giants have expressed an interest to join yet. They say payments are commoditized, but products are not. They also fear for their own existence. If everyone is going to be the same, what will each of them stand for is the big question. What will brands stand for? And then who will assure for quality and reliability? Hello and welcome to Young Turks, India's longest running show on startups and entrepreneurship. I'm Shireen Bhan. And as ONDC turns one, we have some questions to ask. Joining me now is Sujith Nair, the co-founder and CEO of the Foundation for Interoperability in Digital Economy. Anshoo Sharma, the co-founder and CEO of magicpin. Also with us, Sagar Daryani, the co-founder and CEO of Momo. He's also the vice president of the National Restaurant Association of India. Gentlemen, always a pleasure. Many thanks for joining us. Sujith, let's get started with you. You know, we've seen headline after headline over the past 2 weeks to a fortnight screaming that ONDC is now going to be India's next UPI moment as far as e-commerce is concerned, and so on and so forth. But let's try and break the assertions up one by one. And let's talk about what is claimed, that this is in fact going to break the monopoly, break the duopoly across several segments and several sectors. Explain to us how you believe that's likely to happen.
Thanks, Shane. Firstly, thank you for having me on your show. I think I'll probably take a step back and answer this question a little differently. ONDC is a force of inclusion. I think ONDC essentially as a digital public infrastructure, a bit like UPI, is trying to solve for two things. Solve for, widening the access to digital, especially for small businesses across India, across sectors, and also solve for reducing this cost of innovation, market expansion, and spreading that innovation and making that happen so that many more startups can solve for this complex problem of e-commerce and not just a few companies. So it's not so much about disrupting some of the existing incumbents or anything, but just about widening the access, having more players come in, innovation come in, solving for access and making more and more goods and services accessible in a seemingly easy way for consumers to discover and purchase. It's not so much about it's the status quo change is more about market expansion and allowing more players and not about disrupting the few players that we have today.
The question, Sagar, and I'll start by asking you is, let's address the issues that Sujith has raised, that this is a force of inclusion, that it wants to solve for widening access, and it also wants to solve for reducing the cost of doing e-commerce. Do you believe that it will be able to achieve both those goals?
I really agree with Sujith. Shireen, today you have 467 million social media users, whereas, on the aggregator platforms, you just have 25, 30 million users. So I think ONDC can go a long way in increasing the user base when it comes to people coming and doing digital ordering. Coming to cost, Shireen, we are in a very, we are an ecosystem where the restaurateur is being charged high commissions. They are not happy. The customer is being charged surge delivery charges from 25 rupees to 40 rupees. They are definitely not happy. We have the P&L results for the aggregators. They are not making money. Definitely they're not happy. And their investors are also not happy. So we are in an environment where, or an ecosystem where no one is happy, right? I think this business model has to change. This ecosystem, for it to survive and sustain, I think ONDC is going to create that path to profitability for the restaurateur. At the same time, it's going to provide that level playing field for the fraternity.
That's what I want to get into. You know, the argument that you're putting on the table, and which is what we've heard from people, is that, look, nobody is happy in the current ecosystem. And of course, at this point in time, we're talking largely about the food aggregator business, and which is why you will possibly see ONDC take off. But it's following the same principles up until when the order to cap discounts came in. The reason why sales took off was because they were following exactly the same business model as the one that you're unhappy with. So given the spending power and the spending capacity of the Indian consumer at this point in time, are you sort of, is this optimism on ONDC being able to solve for that misplaced?
Not really. So I completely agree with you. I mean, the differential pricing that you saw on Twitter trending all these days was because of the deep discounting offered by different platforms, which are, powered by ONDC, etc. Completely against deep discounting. I think for it to be a level playing field, the user base has to go up. You know what will happen, Shireen? Once the commission is lower and, you have a third party last mile person doing the delivery for you, which charges you 35 rupees for 3 kilometers, it makes it cheaper for the restaurant. What the restaurant will do is pass on that benefit to the consumer. What you see today online is the online pricing is higher and then the discount to it. You will see that nullifying. And I think that is where we need to get to.
Let me get a view in from magicpin, because in many ways, Anshoo, you're being called the silent winner on ONDC, and that's because you've actually seen your daily orders jump from 1,000 to 10,000 by early May. So let me understand from you, through your own experience, of why you believe this is going to work.
What we saw as the opportunity is that if we could plug in our 2 lakh merchants onto the network over a period, and they get a lot more distribution than what we were getting just on our app, that's a win-win for everyone. And I'll go back to the point that you brought up, and all very rightly so, that if the same seller now, instead of 2 platforms, can access maybe 20 more big platforms, like, that's a big win. The cost of doing business for the merchant goes down. Sagar gave the example of the logistics company. But just the marketing spend, that goes down. The consumer sees more options from local at many more places. And that is a win-win for the whole ecosystem. What we saw, in fact, not just 10,000. The next week, we did 20,000 orders on the network. We could do that because the rails are getting established.
How many are you doing this week? Anshoo, how many did you do this week?
Oh, so let me come back to what you're trying to understand. The discounts going away did not take the volumes away to that extent. We saw the tapering down of the volume, but it's not that it went away. And let me connect that back to, while Sagar said discounts are bad, but not really. You need to establish consumer behavior. We don't want to build one more of that same behavior. But what is happening now is user behavior is established, merchant behavior is established. The new platform that's going to get built will get built a lot faster, much less investment in building the network, really zero fixed cost.
But Sujith, let's come back and talk about some of the complexities, because Anshoo rightly pointed out that he could service the going from 1,000 to 10,000 to 20,000. He didn't give us a number of what he currently is at, because he does have the back end in place at this point in time. He already has worked and solved for that issue. But, some of the new players that you're talking about, if the idea really is of democratization, how do you solve for that? How do you solve for the reliability? How do you solve for the quality aspects as well?
I think for a new player to come in on ONDC and do it at scale, let's say how Anshoo's magicpin is doing already, I think firstly, they have to get a basic tech in place, and joining onto ONDC from a tech point of view is a very additional little effort that it takes, because it's a very lightweight protocol in terms of an engineering effort. But I think some of the things that they can do is to sort of have a way to establish trust for the items in their catalog, for the sellers they're offering, and to enable that as much as they can do that from ground zero, like any new platform would. What ONDC is enabling is, on top of that, ONDC is offering its own trust infrastructure. A new platform can leverage and harness that infrastructure on ONDC without having to prove all by itself. And this also is a reduction of cost of doing business, reducing friction and enhancing trust. And ONDC gives that additional shot in the arm for a new platform to get going on ONDC.